Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we have with us the owner and president of Pulse Marketing and the author of Exposed, You Can't Heal When You Hide, Serena Mastin. Serena, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
We're honored that you join us. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Hackers find ways to bypass security every day. The modern business is like a massive house. It doesn't matter how much or how little you spend on your security system. If you don't have a way of knowing when criminals have found a way to bypass your security, they're going to do what they came to do, and your alarm system isn't going to stop them. If you don't have a way of detecting intruders that have found a way past your security, check out cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. All right, Serena, I'm super excited to have you on and can't wait to hear about your book. For those who are familiar, can you give us the rundown, the idea behind the book? Tell us a little bit about it.
So I initially started writing the book in my own healing process. It's a memoir about my personal story. I started my life in witness protection, multiple foster homes. By the age of 15, I was living on the streets. And then most recently, after, being in business for 10 years, now this is our 10-year anniversary, 3 years ago, my husband committed suicide. So it has been not just a journey, in life, but in business. And so it kind of all overlaps. Everything that happens in your personal life impacts your business. And I really wanted to find the courage to share my story in a very vulnerable, raw way in order to connect with people that are still potentially afraid to share their stories.
Wow. I think I'm struck by the human resilience of that. I mean, it's easy for people to see somebody who's clearly successful. You seem to have everything that you could, all the advantages in life, right? And yet on the surface, without realizing everything that you've gone through, how do you do that? How do you overcome such difficulty, such trauma? And then you're clearly very optimistic, very happy, and get to where you are today. How do you do that?
Well, I would say it was a long process of healing. Healing isn't linear, right? So, originally I thought I could just check off the boxes of healing and I would be done. But it's been a lifelong process of really like uncovering, certain emotions or certain experiences and kind of facing them in a way that, helps you conquer those fears, identify potentially what behaviors are, your patterns are, what your triggers are, becoming more self-aware. Healing is a daily practice. And so I would say one of the things that really stands out to me is that I have a tendency to have a really high tolerance for stressful situations. And because I've been through so much, the brightness and the vibrancy that you see in me is because I really I don't look at some of the challenges that others do and find it debilitating because I've been through so much.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot in people who survive really traumatic things. There tend to be two kinds of outcomes, right? You either embrace it and have it be something that makes you stronger, or you let it crush you. You have a hard time dealing with it. I'm assuming, not having read your book yet, but I'm excited to. I'm assuming that that's what you're referring to when you're talking about hiding from the trauma, from the pain, from everything. Is that Is that
Well,
right?
and because I actually did hide for most of my life. As a child, I experienced sexual abuse, and that's why I was in witness protection. And so as a child, I hid in the closet, like a little girl trying to hide, getting away from the danger. Well, that same pattern continued in different forms throughout my life, whether it was hiding under the mask of being strong and I'm okay, whether it was hiding, information to protect other people, whatever it may be. I recognized, especially during my writing process, that my pattern was to seek safety in isolation and hiding. And so this is my commitment to myself to find the courage to stop hiding.
Well, and so I think it's part of that, that having the courage to do that. Is there some where did you get that courage to do? Because a lot of people, I think they're just, you're hiding because you're afraid. So how did you find the courage to not be afraid and embrace that and to stop hiding? Was there a trick or
Well,
is it?
it came through recognition first. Like I had to recognize that there was a pattern. Then I had to identify what triggers kept putting me back into that behavior. And then once I recognized it, once I was self aware enough to identify, okay, this is what I'm doing, it was not easy to stop doing it. I have a tendency still to withdraw and isolate in many situations. And it's something that I had made a conscious effort to say, okay, every time that I find myself in a position where I'm about to withdraw, I'm going to walk through some of those self-limiting beliefs. What's causing this? I'm going to write it down. I'm going to listen to, books that are about healing so I can learn more about it. I went to counseling. I did like meditation. All of those things combined were just part of the process. But I think the most powerful thing was surrounding myself with individuals that inspire, encourage, motivate, and challenge me to not hide.
That is impressive. I think it's so. Yeah, I think that s- sexual, abuse is so prevalent and in our society, and it's so horrific, and yet it's not. It doesn't seem to me to be um, prosecuted with a zero tolerance, and I think that's the most you know horrific indictment of our society. I'm a huge fan of our country. I served my country, love it, great. And I maybe wonder if I got took the wrong path because you see things like this and you see we've got a daughter who just went off to college and you hear about what they're how they're these fraternities are drugging girls at parties and it's just commonplace and it's common knowledge. Oh, that's yeah, and it's and yet people still go to these parties and it's so acceptable, and they're not, these kids aren't just all shot. I think they should be drug out in the street and shot just right. And there you go. That's okay. And it would only take so long before that's not a problem anymore. Right. But I don't know. I don't know.
So
It
let me
irritates me and
let
it
me
frustrates
share,
me. Yeah.
yeah, why I'm so passionate about the security industry is because as a little girl, my father, my biological father, was the leader of a satanic cult, and he took my virginity before the age of 5. And his goal was to sacrifice my sister and I to the cult as a sexual sacrifice, which in the 80s, sex trafficking was not a term. But that would have been the path if I didn't get out in time. And so the reason I'm so passionate about the security industry is it's because of people like that, that protected me when I was vulnerable.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that is such a powerful and intense story. And so how do you go from that? I mean, there's so much to to unwrap there. There's, that inflicts so much y- on a small child. And then how do you then grow up and then not, how do you combat the effects of that, right? To heal through that and not let that dictate your life and say, oh, now I don't like people. I don't want to engage in this, that, the other because of these bad things. How do you find the strength to do that?
As a child, I was diagnosed with dissociation because I couldn't remember some of the trauma.
Yeah.
So that was my own body, and mind protecting myself from some of those memories. But obviously, as I got older, some of those memories surfaced. So the beauty in how our minds work is that it wasn't all at once. And actually, as a child, I didn't know that wasn't normal because that was the only normal I knew. And so it was honestly more shocking for me to be ripped out of that environment and put into foster homes because I was now the thing that I've known forever was completely changed. Yes, it was for my safety, but as a little girl, you don't know that.
Yeah.
You just know that now you're living with strangers.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so then there's all those, obstacles. And so obviously there was PTSD, there was anxiety and depression. There was, through my teen years, I struggled with eating disorders. And it just felt like I was following through with everything that, the statistics would say about a child who experienced that. And when I started to recognize that, it was almost as though I just wanted to prove everyone wrong.
Good for you. That's a good driver, right? I mean, that's
It
driven a lot of
is.
people to success.
And that was what actually drove me to find other ways of healing, because the counseling and the therapy, there was all types of versions of counseling, right? Because when you're a
Yeah.
child and you're going through these really traumatic events, it's also you're dealing with different types of counselors to understand what happened, court hearings, all of these things. And so the counseling was only one aspect of it, and the therapy. Once I recognized that that wasn't enough, that I needed something more, then that's where the curiosity came in. And I was like, well, if I'm not going to be a statistic, I have to figure out how I'm going to be successful, how I'm going to face some of these things. And it was a lot of different things. It's not just one thing that came in and was like the snap your fingers and you're better.
Yeah.
One of the things I did when I was probably in my mid to late 20s is I attended a workshop that basically unpacked all of the old baggage. And what I recognized in that time was, because of the experience that I've had, I've become a people pleaser, the codependent, the protector, the chief enabler, all of those things, right? Like, so even though in my mind, I thought I've overcome all these things, I recognize that those things are just as bad.
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and so then I had to work through those, emotions. And so
Yeah.
it's been definitely a process. It's not something that I could say this one thing did it, but other than my drive and determination to prove everyone wrong.
Hey, that's as good as any. So, I mean, that is such a powerful story. In terms of your book, who would you say your target audience is here? I mean, is this anybody with any sort of? I mean, everybody's got something to overcome, right? And
Well, yeah, but I would say, there's so many aspects of my story that, really relate to so many people. Every single person has experienced pain, right? And I look at pain as, it doesn't matter how big or how small the pain may be, or how traumatic it may sound, or how small, someone may make it or dismiss it. It all hurts the same. And so when we are able to listen or learn about people that have experienced things that are unafraid to speak those things, it gives us a different view of our own stories and kind of uncovers our own. So the reason that I think it's so powerful, not just for women per se, but for people in the security industry, for because it's the survivor and the warrior. If I look at the security industry, that's the warrior. And now they're actually getting to hear a success story about one of their, victims that has turned into a survivor.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's just, yeah. I mean, that is just fantastic. I'm really looking forward to reading your book. That's and so how do you go from a childhood like that to then starting your business, which is wildly successful. It's a fantastic business. How do you that is a how do you do how did that happen? Can you take us through that process? Because you wouldn't necessarily expect it. I think your desire to fight the statistics, you definitely beat the odds and beat them good,
Yeah.
right? So that's awesome. So how did you do that? Can you kind of give us a picture there?
Kind of fighting my way through the corporate ladder was a part of the process. I worked in a lot of male dominating industries and had to prove my worth, right? And prove,
Yeah.
earn my respect. And as I was climbing these corporate ladders and learning about, some of the industries we serve, construction industry and, all of that, what made me really step back and recognize that I wanted to start the agency was actually my mom. So, my mom, when we got taken away, had to earn her rights back as a parent. And so, just the excruciating process of that, because she was also in danger at the time and didn't realize that she was going to lose us. So, my mom is my hero. And she had said at one point, if you even invested a quarter of yourself into your own business comparatively to what you invest in everyone else, she said, there's no way that you wouldn't be successful. And I said, yeah, mom, you're supposed to say that. You're my mom. Right. And she's like,
Uh-huh.
well, if you're not going to do it for you, you should do it for me. And I was like, you are so manipulative, but I will. I will do it for you, because she knew that I also
I love
wanted
that.
to show her that I was capable.
That's great.
And little did we know that that was going to be also a treacherous journey. Owning a business is treacherous. It's like,
Yes.
self inflicted pain is how I would say it. And, when I started the agency in 2013, I would say it wasn't just that I didn't have any money. It was that I had no idea what I was doing. And we were working out of my loft, and it was rough. I was in a place at that time where I had just found out. So my husband and I got married in 2010. We got together.
Mhm.
And then in 2012, we got married. And 2 weeks after we got married, I had found out about the first woman that he had been with. So
While you
I
were married?
just gotten back from our honeymoon and blending our families together. And this woman at the time walks in my office and describes my home, tells me about her relationship with my husband for the past year as we're planning this wedding. And
What?
now I'm humiliated, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm just mortified. I just brought our families together, and now I'm in this position where I couldn't even breathe, right? Like and it wasn't that I was angry with her because I had this woman crying in my office. It felt like I was having an out of body experience.
Yeah.
Um, it was that I was devastated that I just made this huge commitment with someone that I didn't know. And we worked through that, which is so incredibly, like unbelievable. We actually started going to different, marriage therapists, marriage counseling, intense workshops, like whatever you could imagine, we did it to make it work, because I was like, there is no way in hell I'm going to fail at this. Despite of what happened, we worked through forgiveness, all of that. And when I started the agency, and he had come home from work early one day, and I swear to you, he raised his hands up high and he said, I quit my job. And I was like, what? I was like, I'm about to lose my mind. Like, are you, what? And he said, if I'm going to sell anything, I'm going to sell something I believe in, and I believe in you. I'm like, okay. So he did, and he did it well. And we grew the agency, from our little loft to a 3,500 square foot dream office that we'd always wanted. And it was running. However, behind the scenes, there were deeper issues. And at the time, I did not understand enough about mental health to even approach that. I also thought, because every time that an infidelity was uncovered, he would go into almost like a suicidal tendency, to where he would then start saying that, like, I can't live with myself. I don't want to be here. It's my fault that you're hurting. So, right. So you have all of these different dynamics that are happening while we're raising 3 kids. My parents had to move in with us, running a business, and so I took those things and I was like, I can't tell anyone about this.
Yeah.
Because it's going to damage his reputation. I'm going to lose, my family's going to be ripped apart. And I'm also looking at my business like everything we worked so hard for is now completely, like, it's going to be destroyed. So I just have to be strong and just face it and just deal with it.
Wow.
And it was tough. And so what really started happening, where once I built this agency and we're running it, and I'm just behind the scenes with my team and not getting involved on the front side. And so a lot of other things started to come to the surface that I wasn't recognizing, because that was his place. And
now, when you say the front side, you mean he's doing the sales and bringing in the clients. You're now servicing the accounts, being on the creative side, right?
On the creative side, I was the receptionist. I was the legal department, the HR department, the payroll department.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got
And
it.
so it's almost like I didn't have the capacity to even really deal with some of the things in our personal lives. But then I started to see my body deteriorate. I was distracting myself with work and working 14 hours a day. Then when I got home and I tucked the kids into bed, I then found myself crying in the closet again. So I recognized, okay, I have to come up with a plan, because I can't live like this. My entire body I had chronic pain. The stress and the anxiety and all of that was just like a dark cloud that hung over me all the time. What I didn't realize at the time is that everything in your personal life, it seeps into your business. So then there started to become more business issues. I wasn't able to collect money. We lost clients. Like, it was crumbling all around me. And what I recognized at that point, and in leaving him, I thought I was prepared to lose everything and start over again. But remember, I came from nothing. So starting over again is something that's very familiar.
Yeah.
It just doesn't feel good.
Yep.
And so in that path, I've really spent the last 3 years cleaning up the aftermath of all of that unraveling. And it's been, it's not something that I would say was easy. It's not something that happened over time. I had to rebuild relationships with clients. I had to create a safe place for my staff to feel like they could come in and trust me with anything. I had to learn how to be an empathetic leader and vulnerable with them. So yeah, the business has been through, definitely its own set of unfortunate circumstances, but we are still standing. And that is a big deal. I mean, we're barely standing, but we're still standing.
Well, I mean, you are just so naturally. Clearly, you've really mastered the kind of art, if you will, or the skill of being vulnerable and yet strong and brave and embracing the things that come. And I think, you touched on some really interesting points about how your personal life and business, intertwine and and kind of bleed over, because I think you just are who you are, whether you're at work or you're at home, and you have a life. And you can't, I don't think that when people try to compartmentalize and they say, I'm going to work and now I'm at home, you can't be a separate person. If you were stressed out all day at work, you're not coming home and suddenly turning on the happy face and being happy guy or happy girl. It's just, it doesn't work. You're a human being going through your life. And so it's, when you bring that, what's clearly it's so much, strength and genuine care and concern and compassion to everything, and that having that the bravery to embrace. And I think a lot of people just don't, they don't want to do it. It's work, and they're afraid of it. It's just easier to ignore, and I could just put it off. There's so many things that are enjoyable. I'm just gonna scroll on Instagram. I'm just gonna have a cookie. I'm just gonna whatever. I'm going to have another glass of wine. Whatever it is, that is far more enjoyable than dealing with whatever this challenge is. And I love that you called it a challenge and not a problem. You're right. Because semantics are so important. You're right. The words we choose have so much power. And people miss that. They say, oh, look, people might be there. Depression's a thing for sure. But I think when people who are just a little down say that I'm depressed today, you've now given this huge thing to this little thing that oh, I'm a little bummed today because I didn't get much sleep or whatever, or something kind of bad happened. And now I'm depressed. No, you're not depressed. And if you use those big words, now you've got to overcome those big challenges. But I think
Yes.
it's so interesting how you're kind of you piece all this together in your story, and this being this empathetic, compassionate leader who just embraces stuff. I think that's such a great example, and we need more of that. I think culturally we've come from a place where a leader is a strong, decisive decision maker who just acts and just you know, okay, maybe in wartime, you need that, but the rest of the time, you need a human being who can help you embrace the challenges of the day and have that bravery. I don't care if it's you're talking about a personal issue or a work issue. Those challenges need, you've got to be brave enough to face them and not just kind of try to sweep it under the rug for another day, because it comes back to bite you. I don't care what it is.
Well, yeah. And I call some of those things like numbing, right? Numbing is ignoring it and finding things that are temporary joy in order to forget the pain. Pretending, masking. I was the queen of pretending for a really long time, pretending everything's okay, pretending I'm strong. Like
Fake it till you make it.
in the midst of all of that. But the interesting thing, I thought I was so good at pretending. My staff and my kids saw right through me.
Yeah.
So the lack of vulnerability is actually the person not choosing that path because everyone can see it anyway.
Yeah.
And it was humiliating for me because I really believed I was good. I was good at hiding things. I was good at
Mhm.
pretending. I was good at being strong. And so the moment I recognized, number one, the humiliation behind feeling exposed, feeling like everyone knew but me, I really felt like the blindfold at that moment came off. And the beauty in this is that I went to my staff, and at this point, everything could have been like falling apart. It was COVID. Our office got broken into. There was $40,000 worth of equipment stolen.
Ah,
Our we were in a lawsuit with a client that wouldn't pay the media that we purchased in advance, and it was $60,000 worth of
oh,
media that we purchased on their behalf. And then all of this unraveled. What I didn't realize is that all I had to do was go to them and ask for help. And so that in itself took courage. And I went to them and I said, I have nothing left. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make payroll. I don't know if I have to close the business or I'm going to lose my house. I don't like, I was just, I had no answers. And I said, so I need your help and I need you guys to tell me what to do. And you can imagine that my staff is also experiencing all of this trauma with me, right? And
that's right.
so they came together and they said, it's better than that one of us, that all of us suffer a little than one person suffer a lot. And they got that from a Simon Sinek quote. And so they cut their hours in half in
Wow.
order for us to all stay together. And they lifted me up when I could not even make a decision. They ran the company when I was broken. And so, to be honest, that vulnerability builds trust,
That's-
it builds rapport, and it allows people an opportunity to rise up.
Yeah.
So,
And I think people fail to realize that the real strength is in being vulnerable. It takes so much more. That's actual strength. It is not strong to pretend to be strong and bark orders and just decisively make a decision. And that's what all this old leadership, literature tells you to do. And maybe it's because I'm old army and they're big on that, but it's also in a lot of leadership books that just make a decision. It doesn't matter because you'll learn either way. Fine, fine, right? But the reality is, it takes so much more bravery and courage and strength to be vulnerable and say I don't know, and let people know that, hey, and without
don't
being
have all
a
the answers.
don't have all the answers, and I'm not a complete mess. I don't have the
I mean, I
answers, and
was, but
I,
yeah.
yeah, and sure, but there's that balance, but it's that mess that you trust. You're like, yeah, you're human, you're going through some stuff right now. We're in this together, and that's how you build this strong, cohesive team who helps each other. And I think that's just such a great lesson to for everybody, because I think every business leader struggles with that, right? There's so many people struggle with the imposter syndrome because they don't feel like I'm legit. I deserve this. A million reasons
Yeah.
why and everybody else is more successful. Instagram and everything else is showing you that everybody's got this perfect life and they're perfectly beautiful and they're perfect. They've got all the money and all the answers and all the everything. And why am I the one who's struggling with this? Why don't I have all the money, all the beauty, all the answers? And so people, I think kids all the way up through the ages, everybody, you know, has to be brave enough to identify reality. And
And it's terrifying because you worry about judgment, you worry about looking as if you're not capable. A good example is, my stomach just turns thinking about this, but I've had such a hard time getting our sales back up, right? So I just every time I finally get ahead, um, I something happens, we lose a client. In the last 3 months, we've lost about 14,000 in reoccurring revenue. And that is huge because it's me not getting paid, right? Like
Mhm.
it's my team, cutting their hours. And how do you keep your team happy even in doing that? And so then I had a friend that told me, like, you just need to ask for help. And of course, your pride gets in the way. Of course, you feel embarrassed. And so he actually wrote like what he told me to say. And he said, now post it on LinkedIn. Now I'm humiliated that in front of 7,000 of my followers, I am this, just putting my life out there saying, help me, right? Like
Yeah.
the
Uh-huh.
hardest things that you could imagine.
Yeah. That's tough.
And I have to say that people, what I learned, because I didn't feel this when I did it, but what I learned is that people appreciate vulnerability. They respect it. They
Yeah.
actually want to help. And
Yeah.
if you don't ask for it and you keep pretending that you got this until it collapses,
Yeah.
well, then that actually is really the issue that you need to work on, right? Because
It is.
it is already hard enough to ask for help. But when you don't ask for help, then you're just putting yourself in a worse position over time. And it just starts to really weigh on you. And
So
I've
let me
had
ask.
to learn that over time. It's not something that comes natural.
Yeah, no, I don't. Well, I think for a lot of people, especially business, owners and leaders, asking for help. We grew up in a culture that well, that's not even taught. You're supposed to be strong, independent,
I can
successful
do it
on your
myself.
own.
I
I
don't
do it
need
myself.
anyone else.
Yep. Oh, you know what? That's such a load of crap because nobody is a success alone. You cannot do it alone. I don't care who you are. You could be eh, Albert Einstein. You can be Edison. You can be Elon Musk. You can be as smart and as hardworking as possible. But all of them were successful because of many, many, many other people, and it's the work together. So let me ask you, going to back to your recent vulnerability, you're recently asking for help. How did that play out? You so there you are, you bare your soul, you feel ah yeah, embarrassed, you feel but you're embracing it, you're
Embarrassed
strong,
is
you
an
do it. What
understatement,
happened?
but yeah, embarrassed is an
Right?
understatement, right?
For sure.
Um, it was an outpour of love. It was an
Nice.
outpour of, it's not that I just got a bunch of clients, right? Like it didn't happen that way. But what did happen is everyone came together asking what they could do to support me. Can they introduce me to some people? Can we partner
Mm.
together? What can we do differently? Can we brainstorm your business and find other ways? Like I needed actually that, I think, more than I needed business, right? Like
Yeah.
I knew I
Well,
needed
that's where it
business to
comes
pay
from.
the
Yeah.
bills.
Right.
but
I don't need
but
money.
it was almost like I just had this community
Yeah.
of support when I was terrified to ask for help. And when I did, it just shifted my entire like thought process about asking for help because I was so scared that people would judge me and say, "Oh, you're trying to ask for a handout," or "Figure it out, we all did."
Yeah.
Right? Like that. Those are
Right.
the voices in my head. And when people just came together and were like, "Let's find a way.
Yeah.
Let's brainstorm. Let's jump on a call. I have some introductions I can do." It doesn't mean that it converted into business. It means that I found a sense of acceptance
Yeah. What
that I was afraid of.
oh, 100%. And but I mean, with that, I mean, with business, the more people know you and like you. I mean, you're just so naturally likable, and there's so the more that you have of people knowing you. So as and you get those of course, more money follows that. Money follows attention and connections, right? So
Well, and yeah, the
obviously, it resulted in
relationship
more business.
first
Yeah.
obviously leads to that. It's just a really slow process, right?
Yeah. It's really
It
interesting. So
takes time. It's intentional. You're building trust. It's not selling at all.
yeah,
So you have to be willing to sacrifice your time and energy to develop these relationships Because yes, they will, the more you invest in others, it will naturally grow your business.
Yeah.
But to be very honest, it's also on the flip side a scary process because if you don't have time,
Yeah.
get into panic mode.
I think the balance there, from a purely business perspective, and I think one of the things that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is that if you didn't, first of all, I think everybody is in sales all the time, right? You're constantly selling somebody on something, whether it's going to dinner or whether it's whatever it is, your ideas, you're constantly selling them. And as a business owner, you're the senior most salesperson, right? For the business. I think for entrepreneurs that don't come from a sales background, we may come from marketing, we may come from whatever the operations of that business are,
Operation.
and so then you're like, well, how do we do the sales part? Well, the marketing part, yeah, that gives us, people get introduced to us, and we may get inbound leads, and we those are pretty easy to convert. That's great, but how do you get out there and sell? And so building a sales department and building that mentality, and sadly, so much of sales has been this used car salesman. Everybody hates the cold call, the annoying telemarketer, that old crap. It's so bad. And it's got such a horrible stigma that I think for so many entrepreneurs, we struggle with how do you have a modern sales force that is building relationships, that is bringing your great products and services to people to offer with where it's a good right fit for both and everybody wins. And finding the people who can do that, finding the right sales you know training. And not a plug for Easton University, but I gotta say, if I don't know if you've seen this, Matt Easton at Easton University got this great sales coaching stuff, and we started using it, and it was phenomenal. And it was just one of these things where I struggled with it for the longest time. We built up our business with relationships, and I'm like, I cannot scale me, right? Like, this is not a scalable business. Yeah, people like Matt, and then they do business with Matt and his company, but I'm just me, and I can't clone myself. That's still illegal, and even if the technology is there. So I'm like, how do we do this? And this, every time we try these different sales programs and different sales things, and all these marketing that tied into this, just old sales crap, it was always like, ugh, it's grody, and it doesn't, we're wasting a ton of money. I don't like it. And no, right. So and then we finally found something that works, and it's something that's so great because it's natural. It's based off like real human interaction. Anyway, so it's funny because as you talk about like bringing in those, how do you, that's what we found was that cure for that balance of, look, I've got to build relationships. And so, yeah, I'm building relationships. Great, cool. But again, I only have so much time in a day, and I can only know so many people. And so how do I scale that? And so anyway, that's
No, but
something
that
to
ties
look into.
into some of the struggles that I have. So
Yeah.
remember, I like to be behind the scenes. I find safety in hiding. Putting myself out there is unsafe. And adding those experiences plus one of the things that I started to recognize when I started to try and sell is I found myself in very uncomfortable situations where people crossed boundaries and would do inappropriate things because I'm a woman. They saw what they wanted and they thought it was okay to to approach me in a way that dismissed my experience and my value. So then what do you think that did to me? I
Oh,
go
yeah.
right back to hiding, and then it impacts my sales,
Yeah.
and then it impacts my business.
Yeah.
And I had to then again recognize that, okay, I can't let that continue to hurt me. What do I need to do? And there's someone actually, Steve Hernandez with the North Group, gave me this one tip that blew my mind, by the way. And I use this now all the time. And it's so simple. And I just wish I would have known it way earlier. He said, when I go into any situation, I have an exit strategy, right? I have all the things I need. I have like, my firearm. I have, he's like, I know, like I'm planning for that situation. He's like, you have to look at your interactions, especially when they're in person, as that you have to be prepared. You have to have an exit strategy. You have to have like an out or, something that comes in where you can not only set the boundaries, because it's a very uncomfortable thing as a woman when somebody crosses the boundaries, then you set it, you lost the client anyways, right? But you didn't want
Yeah,
them now. But it's
exactly.
still very uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah.
You're like, you don't treat me like that. Like,
Yeah.
you just don't do that. You
Yeah.
gracefully like to shuffle
Yeah.
yourself. And
Me and my friends Smith and Wesson are leaving now.
we're leaving, but when he just made it simple and was like, if I'm going into a hostile situation, he's like, I'm looking in every direction. I've mapped it out. I've made a plan. I had, and I was like, oh my gosh, I never thought of that before I go into a meeting, because I assumed that I would have the respect or that I would be valued. And he said, no, you can't assume that you're safe.
Yeah.
You have to create it. And I was like, mind blown.
So how do you then create it? Like now, giving that advice to others, how do you implement that? Because I mean, it's one thing for me. I'm a 6'4", 215-pound guy. Even though it does cross my mind, and I'm very aware of physical security all the time. It's an entirely different world for me than it is for you. And so, what do you do? How do you implement that exit strategy? And yeah, how do you do that?
So not only am I the complete opposite, I'm 5'1" and maybe 135 pounds. So you could imagine that
Yeah.
I don't go in there with my shoulders puffed out, right? Like
Yeah. Bring it. Yeah, right.
at first I blamed myself. I thought that what did I do to make them think that this was okay? Right. And then I recognized, okay, instead of going back into that pattern of blaming and shame, let's identify, okay, if this happens, what will I do? So now I'm actually a little bit more prepared. Now there's always the unknown, but I typically walk into a meeting with here's my hard stop. That already sets the expectation
That's
that you're
nice.
not there to hang out.
That's
Okay.
nice. Yeah.
I also now walk into a meeting. Now, keep in mind, when these situations happened, I was completely professional dressed. Like I was
Of
covered from
course.
head to toe. So it's not like I had to change something that like physical.
Of
There's
course.
nothing I could do unless I wore, a bag over my head. Okay. Like,
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
but I had to carry myself differently. So I'm a very friendly person. I'm very nurturing. I'm very thoughtful. I'm empathetic, right? I had to also remember and reserve those things for specific people that have earned them, right? So I had to create boundaries. And so I actually have an acronym for my boundary. You might make fun of me for this.
I don't think I will.
It's easy to say you have boundaries and then forget what they are, right? Like,
Yeah.
and just never follow through, because then it's just a wish, not a boundary.
Hmm.
So I created an acronym and it's BRAVE.
I
Okay.
like it. Hmm.
I have to be brave in order to create
Create the
boundaries,
boundaries.
right?
Yeah. Great.
So the B stands for boundaries. You got to do it, right? I
Hmm.
can't just keep not
Right.
doing it.
Right.
The R yeah. The R stands for reliability. You're going to do what you say you're going to do. So if this is a meeting, it's a meeting. If you're gonna be there to discuss certain things, that's what this is.
Yep.
But if there's like a disconnect in that, you do what you say you're going to do portion, which is reliability, that's already breaking the boundary, and I have to follow through with withdrawing.
Hmm.
The A is for accountability. You got to own your part. So if we're having this conversation and I feel uncomfortable, I also have to have the courage to say, that really made me feel uncomfortable. And I know that's a hard thing to say. And I'm not trying to put pressure on you. I just wanted you to know I just didn't feel good about that.
That's
Ah,
awesome. Awesome.
V is for vulnerability. I have to be able to communicate in a way that is thoughtful, honest, and genuine without attacking. Because in those moments, you feel fight or flight or freeze, right?
Yeah. Right.
And then the last one is equal effort. And that one's actually the most important one. Because if there's no equal effort or no equal respect or no equal, right?
Yep.
If it's only me pouring into someone, then that's not the kind of person that I want in my life or my business, anyways.
I love that. So definitely not making fun of Brave. I think I think it is fantastic. I love that. I think we have a very similar kind of personality where when we go into a new meeting somebody new and maybe meeting a new prospect or client, we're very friendly. And we connect very quickly with people. And I think one of the things that I've learned recently is this whole idea of slowing down. Like my mind goes really, really fast. I get really excited about the work that we do and what somebody else is doing and working together. And so I'll get excited about it and I'll be speaking very quickly and being friendly and everything working out well. That's all well and good. But this idea of slowing it down. And if you just slow down and not fill every millisecond of air with the next thought, the next word, the next, and go, go, go. If you just slow down and let other people talk and do their thing. And so, if I'm you and I try to put myself as much as I possibly can in your shoes as you're telling me these things and going through it and really feeling the challenges that you face being you in that situation. And I'm thinking, how do I do that? Not from my perspective as me, and it's hard to go from our perspective to somebody in an entirely different world that you've lived this entire and the world treats you differently in a way that they don't treat me and vice versa. So as I'm sitting there thinking about this, as you're telling the story and trying to put myself in those shoes, I think, you know what? I can see myself doing the same, being in that same position. If I'm you, and that's definitely happening to me and it's not because of something I'm doing. It's this a-hole just thinks they can get away with it and it's okay. And so then I'm now putting
Yeah.
up all these, I got this acronym for how I can set these, but I love
Yeah.
I love the barrier, the boundary of look, when you go in and you say, hey, I've got a hard stop at this time. One that does a bunch of really cool things all at once. But what I love about that is it puts you at this kind of it elevates your position to say, "Hey, look, I've got other things going on. I can't stay here and be your buddy, your pal, your
Hang
friend.
out.
This is not moving to a bar after this. This is
Correct.
this thing right now. And now you're higher value because your time is limited with them." And then that made me think, oh, because that's so brilliant. That's such a great technique, something great to use. And then when you combine that with now kind of the slowing down and not being my normal friendly, I'm going to make you like me self because I want everybody in the world to like me. Now, not trying to overshare here, but that's, one of the things that I
You're not
kind
oversharing.
of
You're
work,
speaking to the
but it's
vulnerability queen over here.
100%. And so, and not to take away from that, but that would be one of those things that I naturally do is like, and why not? If we're going to have an interaction, it might as well be good. Or if it's not, let's stop this. Let's find out quickly and go. But then slowing down and letting them do the work, letting them and you just ask a few questions about whatever, and you let
Questions. The
them.
person who's asking the questions is leading the conversation.
Yep. And I think they will. And the thing I love about it is when you're so directed about this is the direction of this thing, and you've set the clear boundaries. Any a-hole who's then going to say take any step, in even the slightest little step outside of that, well, then this is not the in, and so yeah, then you just have to hold to your boundaries, right? I
And
love
that's
that
tough
acronym. The brave is
too,
great.
because
Yeah.
then you have to be willing to not get a client, even
Yeah.
if you're starving.
Hmm.
But I would rather be starving than continue to work with someone who didn't respect me or didn't value me. So, as much as that decision was hard to make, it was a hard line because the last thing you want to do is open yourself up and your team
Yes, sir.
to someone who doesn't respect or value them, because it's really not a client that's going to be a match anyways.
100%. We've been really lucky. We've only ever fired one client. We found out really early on they were super racist a-holes. It was like, holy crap, we can't work with you guys. You're going to have to find somebody else. This is not going to work. Um, Other than that, we have been really blessed that every single one of our clients we've got even our very first client still to this day. I think on average, we've kept our clients I think we've lost just that one that we fired and then one that ended up going out of business. And so they've all been just wonderful, lovely people. And it makes the entire experience for the entire organization great. Everybody loves everybody we work with. The day is just so much better. So I want to know early on, is this a group that we want to do, that we want to work with and spend our time with or not? And if you get those signs that, oh yeah, great, this is an easy no, this isn't going to work for us guys.
It's not
Next.
easy, no,
Not
right?
when
It's
you're starving,
not
right?
easy,
Yeah.
no, when you don't have the financial foundation.
Yeah.
So I had to make, like a commitment as well that we hire and fire in our team based on our core values. And it's predominantly like the only time you fire if they're not following through on a core value is if they don't have the same values, but you wouldn't have hired them in the first place. So,
Right.
right. Like, so
Yeah.
that there's a lot of meat to that. If people hold the same values, right, then there's better alignment. And so now we've actually taken the approach of when we work with clients, do they align with our values as a team, as a company? Now, sometimes we make exceptions. And what do you think happens when we make those exceptions because we're desperate and we just need another client?
Yeah.
It's the worst experience, not only for us, but for them. And then it doesn't really represent who we are.
I love
So
that.
it's a double edged sword, right? As a business owner.
Well, let me ask you, as you're talking about your clients, because I love the book, I love talking to you about all of your experiences, and I think you're such a great example of bravery and courage that everybody should should try to emulate and learn from. So I'm really looking forward to the book. But now that we're talking about your clients, tell us about your agency, the kind of clients you're looking for, who's an ideal client, what do you do? Let's dig into that a little bit before we spend the next 6 hours, because I think we could easily spend, all day and night
We
talking
have to
about
have a
this stuff.
time
So
limit, don't we?
we
Okay.
know we're good.
So when restructuring the agency, when we first started, we did everything. We were the everything to everyone, and it was just too much to bear.
Yeah.
And then when I had to restructure the agency, the beauty is that I found who we were. When you're at the bottom and you are stripped of everything that you've had, it's when you see your true identity. And
For
so
sure.
through that, we recognize that we are really an outsourced marketing agency. We act as an extension of our clients' businesses without having to hire a full in house marketing team. And so we can build a website, we can run a full ad campaign, create a strategy, and all of those things. But we can also execute on it because we have content writers and graphic designers and who we call our intelligence team, which is all the ones that are smart behind the coding and the emails, that kind of
Nice.
stuff. And so the beauty is that we actually act like a fractional marketing department
Nice.
because a lot of businesses can't afford to have an entire team.
Yeah.
And to be a fractional marketing department, you get access to a chief marketing officer, a graphic designer, a creative director, a content writer. You get access to all of this for less than the price of one person's salary.
Nice.
And like annually, we are less than
Yeah.
one person's salary. So
That's
it's
awesome.
it's a beautiful way of not only providing marketing and advertising services. That's not what it's really about. it's a beautiful way of partnering with different companies and just becoming a part of what they're doing, because we want to see them grow. We're excited about the change they're making in the world.
Yeah. I
And
love
so
that.
we're also cheerleaders on the side,
I love it.
cheering them on.
Makes perfect sense to me. We do the same kind of thing with IT and cybersecurity. So let me ask you. So that makes sense. I'm like, I get like it's same deal. It makes sense. Why would you hire all these things when for the price of one person you get a whole
All
department?
of this.
It's
Yeah.
kind of a no. It's the value proposition is just so obvious. So who's your ideal client? Who is that? What do they look like?
So what's interesting is we typically work in the firearm industry where I know you're like, what?
I love
Um,
that.
and
Old army guy. I love it.
you'd think that they weren't all about heartfelt marketing, but they are, okay?
Yeah.
Um, and then we actually are really getting a lot more integrated into security because of my own personal passion. And it ties in with some of our experience in the firearm industry. We also work a lot in construction industry. So I know it sounds weird that we work with all the good old boys, but they're big teddy bears, and we got some soft spots. So you
That's how it
always
works.
need a balance. And
Mhm.
so that's the beauty in those industries that we love is, we kind of give them that little bit of a softer edge and reach
Yeah.
their customer speaking their language, not just saying, buy it.
Yeah. I love that. So your ideal client is now, I mean, are we talking when we're talking firearms, are we talking like Smith and Wesson? I mean, what
So
size
we've worked
are we?
with some really large companies actually in the past because it's been years now. So we've kind of put our toes into a lot of different companies. We've worked with Colt. We've worked with
Nice.
Surefire. We've worked with. I mean, there's so many things in my brain right now. Caracal. We've worked with. I mean, I could just go on.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
And so
So,
I actually attend SHOT Show every year.
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Very
So
cool.
because it's an exciting fun industry to be a part of, and that they're
Yeah.
actually making an impact on the world because I know that there's all this politics behind firearms coming from someone who lost their husband to suicide. To just be really clear, he shot himself. I do not blame the gun.
Right.
The firearm industry is not to blame. It's unresolved issues, it's mental health, it's not getting and seeking
Absolutely.
the people or the things that you need, it's masking. Those behaviors led him to do what he did. And so, coming from someone who's experienced it firsthand, I look at the firearm industry as like, I know it sounds weird, but I mean, without them, we wouldn't have heroes.
Yeah. Oh, it's 100% true. I mean, yeah, I'm right there with you. Totally agree. Yeah, we have a mental health problem in this country. We don't there's a stigma, there's not enough support for it that
They tiptoe
so many
around
things.
it.
Yep.
Yeah,
It's not the
it's
guns.
just much easier to point the finger
It's
at a
so
larger,
is.
you know,
Yep.
market. But I love the firearm industry for that reason. I if you can kind of see a pattern in
Mhm.
who I am, I lean towards the heroes of the world, and that's who I want as my clients
I love
because
that.
that's who have helped me throughout my entire life, and this is my way of giving back.
Aw, I love that. That is fantastic. Honestly, that is perhaps the best note to finish. I have a 100 more things I could talk to you about, but I love that thought. That I think that is a perfect final thought. That is just beautiful. So if you could, on that note, tell the folks where they can find out more about you, where they can get a copy of your book, and of course your agency.
So my agency is Pulse Marketing. And so they can go to pulsemarketingteam.com, and that's where they can find our agency. And then they can literally go on Amazon and type in Serena Mastin, and my book Exposed will be the first to pop up with my face on the cover. You can't miss me, I promise.
I love it. Serena, thanks so much for coming on the show today. This has been, I mean, moving, touching, informative, inspirational. Absolutely. I had a wonderful time. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.